Okay. Doing a mic check. That works. And I'm making myself audible enough at this distance. Excellent. Well, it's a real pleasure to have you here. We have some distinguished people for a panel in a bit. Now, lucky for you, I'm not going to be moderating. I'm just opening this, and then I'll come back at the very end. But we're here to talk about, well, the title for the session is Global Vision, Local Action. And it's about finding ways to finance the future locally led adaptation projects, and we all know that that's something we desperately need. There's no need for me to go into why we need to do that. I think we're all here at COP because we have a fairly deep understanding of that, but it is something we need to do urgently. We need to move faster, and we need to get more adaptation projects happening on the ground. They need to be locally led, because that makes so much more sense than to sort of parachute something into to a foreign country. And it's about creating that enabling environment for that to happen. We have, I'm going to hand over to my esteemed colleague soon from UNDP, Srilata, but we have some really exciting panelists here. I'll actually let Srilata to take us through that. But let me highlight the problem we're trying to fix. I always try to think of what's the purpose of me doing something, and how can I be as intentional as possible. There is a lack of access to finance, and there's a lack of access to technical expertise. I just want to break that down a little bit. There is lots of funding for really large-scale stuff out there, and it's not easy, but it's easier to get the funding for it. But to get the ecosystem and the enabling environment to function properly, there's a lot more investments that need to happen. An example I usually give, I'm from Sweden, hence my weird accent, but an example I give, and I've been an entrepreneur in East Africa myself for 15 years, and also in investment. I've seen this weird kind of, I see it as a misunderstanding. If we don't think it will work in Sweden, why do we expect it to work in a much more complex environment like Kenya? You actually need more support, you need more work, you need more patience and so on. And you need the partners that are going to be on the panel in a bit to support that. And I think it's also very important to work together to do that. Because it's only by working together we can actually make a dent on where we need to go. Local adaptation is essential. I think it's a question of a lot of things, but also dignity and honor. At the opening of the Resilience Hub a few days ago, we had the wisdom keepers here, and they said something that really stuck with me. I've been in this space a long time, so when something hits me, maybe I'm emotional because I'm here, I'm nervous about the state of the planet and so on. But they said we have to honor the past and we have to honor the future, and we live in between. So it's what we do now. Oh, I get goosebumps. It's what we do now that matters. The best time to plant a tree was 100 years ago. The second best time is today. So we need to plant many, many trees. We need to address the missing middle. We need to do it together. We need to work in partnership with one another. And therefore I'm very pleased to see the panel, and I look forward to the discussion. Before we go there though, I want to cue a video, if we're ready with that.
Mradi unaoendeshwa na Savannas Forever Tanzania unahusiana na kuboresha maeneo ya malisho yaliyoharibika kwa kuotesha mbegu za mimea ya asili. Unahusisha nyasi na mimea jamii ya mikunde na ile yenye kutoa maua. Ulifanyika katika ngazi ya kijiji ukihusisha makundi mbalimbali. Tumepata mafunzo katika hatua zote, kuanzia jinsi ya kuvuna mbegu, katika kuzisafisha mbegu, lakini pia umepata mafunzo ya jinsi ya namna ya kuziotesha hizi mbegu.
Hii mradi ilio ya kuotesha nyasi yani tumeanza kuona mwaka jana. Ndio wameanza kutufundisha, wakatoa sehemu za maonyesho kama shamba darasa ambayo sisi tunaita lalili. Wameweka hiyo mbegu, yani una fence pale unawekewa mbegu na ikaota. Na hiyo ile sehemu ambayo sasa hivi kama hii tunayoonyeshwa hapa na zingine mengi ambayo tulikuwa tunaona kama kipara tu majani hamna. Majani imeingia na imestawi vizuri. Kwa hiyo sisi kwenye hii mafunzo ya hii mbegu tumeona inaweza kutusaidia.
Sifa za kuwapata wale champion zilikuwa kadhaa. Moja, alikuwa awe anamiliki ardhi, aidha yeye ama mume ama baba. Awe ameridhiwa na partner wake kama ni baba ama ni mama. Awe ni mtu ambaye yuko tayari kushirikiana na jamii kama kufundisha wengine.
Sisi wanawake sasa huku vijijini tunakaaga tu nyumbani. Mradi ikatuchagua kwa ajili ya kufanya kazi na imetutoa kwenye hatua nyingine kwenda hatua nyingine. Tutakuja kufaidika sana kutokana na kupata majani, kwa hiyo njaa za ng'ombe hatutapata tena.
Baada ya kuchaguliwa kwa champion tulijadiliana na mume wangu, tukaona lile eneo lipo tu, maana ni kipara kabisa, haina kitu chochote. Walipotuambia kwamba kuna mbinu ya kuotesha majani na kaota, tukasema ngoja hebu tuwape alafu tuangalie. Na tulivyo hapa kweli tukaotesha majani, kweli majani yakaota.
Mradi unalenga kuwa wanawake hawa na vijana waweze kuuza hizi mbegu, kwa maana hiyo itawaboresha kipato chao na maboresho ya maisha yao kwa ujumla.
Huu mradi wa Savana, si tumeona kijiji serikali imetuletea mabadiliko makubwa sana, na tulivopata huu mradi imetuwezesha unaweza kununua mbuzi yako, kununua kuku wako na kusaidia watoto shuleni.
Thank you. I mean, it's just two quick comments. It's really awesome to see. We have some guys that are actually doing this stuff here today, so that's a real treat. And also just saying that just doing that video is pretty challenging. I've been involved in a couple of those projects. It's great. You really go out and you really see what locally led means, and the challenges that comes with that. We have. I'm going to try to find out if someone from Adaptation Fund is here. No. Well, then I know Srilata is ready to step up, and I'm going to hand over to Srilata. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me? Okay, great. Thank you so much. I think because I'm just counting the chairs, am I supposed to stand there or sit here? Shruti, do you know? We'll stand. So I'm Srilata Camilla. I'm the Global Head for Climate Change Adaptation at UNDP. It's my pleasure to welcome you all, and thank you, first of all, to Jasper and the Global Resilience Partnership. To welcome to this really interesting conversation. I'm excited to be part of this. And it's about the global vision and local action. How do we finance the future of locally led adaptation? So let me again thank the Global Resilience Partnership for what has turned out to be a very aligned in terms of objectives, visions, and commitment of really advancing locally led adaptation, especially focusing on entrepreneurship and innovation, and for the Resilience Hub for hosting us here. So today our discussion is really about some demonstrated impacts of what it looks like when you can work in partnerships. How connecting local innovators to global donors to private sector can really advance sustainable community-led adaptation solutions. So let me actually welcome our panelists. We have panelists from Acumen Fund, BNP Paribas, we have Bangladesh Footsteps, Safe India, and I think we're going to wait for Adaptation Fund to join, but if I can ask everybody to join me here up front. And while you all take your seats, I just wanted to also talk about a little bit of the, what you saw in the video that that was just screened. And this is part of the implementation of what we have called the Adaptation Innovation Marketplace. I think I'll wait for Saliha later, but I'll have a seat for now. And the Adaptation Innovation Marketplace, the vision for us as UNDP was really to create a very fungible architecture that really looks at the different elements of what it takes to promote entrepreneurship. Right from sourcing the ideas, and we work with lots of partners at the country level, regionally, to the grant that allows us to support entrepreneurs, to a pillar around technical assistance and mentoring, not just on the technical parts of things, but business mentoring and legal advice for entrepreneurs, to finally knowledge and exit. And it's within this architecture that we had the wonderful opportunity of being able to implement as an early adopter for the Adaptation Fund's Climate Innovation Accelerator, which is the FCA program, and Adaptation Fund, and then EU joined forces to support the grant window of this fund, which is what enables us to do what you saw. But really, the work of the Adaptation Innovation Marketplace, which would not have any impact without the partners we work with, from the LDC University Consortium to Climate Kickoff EU to UNCDF, a Global Resilience Partnership and others, but also new alliances that have come out of this with Asia Venture Philanthropy Network, the Africa Venture Philanthropy Alliance, LAT Impacto, as well as what we will hear about a little bit more today, alliance with the Global Network for Advanced Management, which is a consortium of leading business schools. And so we're very fortunate to link our grantees to some of these business school students who work with us in helping move the business case and the entrepreneurship possibilities. And that includes from Cape Town School, Business School, to Yale School of Management, Oxford's SAIS Business School, and Asia Institute of Technology, and others. So again, this is just to showcase how when different nodes of this ecosystem comes together, what can be accomplished. And speaking of the nodes of ecosystems, let me now turn a little bit to introducing the panelists first, and then I want to take a moment also to recognize a lot of the impacts that have been brought together because of the panelists. So let me first start by introducing Christopher Wayne, who's our Associate Director of Investing in Agriculture at Acumen. Thank you for joining us, Chris. We have Dipayan Dey. He's the chair of the South Asian Forum for Environment, SAFE, from India. We have Pablo Perez, Sustainable Capital Market Structurer at BNP Paribas, and Shah Rafaat Chowdhury, who's a co-founder and president of Footsteps of Bangladesh. And we'll soon be joined by Saliha from the Adaptation Fund. I want to introduce them before I go into highlighting some of the impacts of this work, because I would like us to keep in mind the entrepreneurs and the different actors that come together in this impact. And for this, I'm going to read off so I get the numbers right. So through the UNDP AFCIA initiative, we're currently supporting 44 organizations across 33 countries, so 44 grants that have been awarded ranging from $60,000 to $250,000, totaling a $7.4 million that's been dispersed alongside technical assistance and capacity building packages worth another $6 million. More importantly, and most importantly, just so you can see the impact, this program has reached over 1.1 million community members. Over 57% of them are women. And the grantees have also collectively raised over 2 million of catalytic kind of financing through the grants that enabled it. And in terms of adaptation impact on the ground, over 1,800 hectares of ecosystems have been restored through the work that the grantees have been doing. Regenerative agriculture that implemented over 9,800 hectares, planted over 180,000 trees. And together, it's these entrepreneurs, because of locally led action, the impact in their communities implies that they've supported 100 startups in green entrepreneurship programs, trained 23 companies in measuring carbon footprint, trained over 4,800 individuals in training on adaptive agroforestry enterprises, over 5,000 households in aquaponics-based enterprises, and overall we've documented 50 plus traditional knowledge-based, community-based adaptation practices. While a lot of you may not, including me, retain all those numbers off our head, it's really critical to understand what this impact means on the ground. And we are very fortunate to be joined by two of our very inspiring partners, Dipayan and Shah, so we'll soon hear from them. So with that, let me now actually get the panel started. If I may, I'll start with you, Chris. Acumen is very well known for its work on leveraging patient capital to combat poverty. And you're now expanding a support in terms of large-scale adaptation, especially in agriculture in emerging markets. And you've been collaborating with AIM, especially through our business school program as well, and we're exploring some more funding potentially for the grantees. Can you share your vision behind Acumen's commitment to adaptation? And really, how do you see, what are the factors that shape your investment decisions when you're looking into investments as well, so we can think about how we also support grantees to work with Acumen?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Srilata. Great to be here, and thanks to UNDP and Jesper and the GRP for having us. Yeah, I mean, Acumen's, we're 22 years old now, and made our first agricultural investment in a drip irrigation company in Pakistan back in 2008. And at that time, Pakistan was experiencing similar heat stress as it is now. Since then, we've seen the effects of flooding and the sort of seesaw effect back and forth of drought and flooding. But back then, it was heat and water access. So we invested in a drip irrigation company in Pakistan in 2008 that was working with a small bundle of irrigation services that would go out to a small farmer, specifically geared towards a small farmer. It started with a 1/4 acre, so this is smallholder-centered design, and said, you can afford enough irrigation for a quarter acre, and when you see the yields and increased income from that, we're going to graduate you to an incremental increase to another quarter acre, and then a half acre, and then a full acre of irrigated land. What we saw there was a business model squarely focused on the challenges of a smallholder farmer in a changing climate way back in 2008. Now, in 2008, we didn't have the same nomenclature we have today. It wasn't climate adaptation and mitigation as much front and center, but very much what we were doing was responding to the adaptation needs of a smallholder farmer at that point. And I think what we've done really well at Acumen since we started was listen to farmers. And I think there's a severe lack of farmers here at COP, and I think it's difficult to get them here. But if I can bring their voice into it a little bit, what we do is survey farmers during every one of our investment processes to ensure that their voice and their needs and their prioritization of whatever the product or service the company is offering is inherently included in our diligence process. And in that way, we can prioritize what the needs are for them. And since the very beginning of our agriculture investing, farmers have taught Acumen that it's the adaptation needs that are really necessary. It's the scale-appropriate equipment that's going to allow them to practice no-till or do light cultivation or plant cover crop. It's the hybrid seeds that are going to be drought-resistant or disease-resistant in a way that allows them to grow through difficult climate stress. And when you center the farmers, the adaptation becomes obvious. It's just apparent. It's what you need to do in order to fund farmers. So since 2008, we've now made $53 million worth of investments across 53 companies across 11 different emerging geographies in climate adaptation for smallholder farmers. And I think inherent in that learning, and there has been a lot of failure and there's been a lot of challenge and stress and headbanging throughout that process, where we've landed recently is that agriculture, as we all know, is inherently local, right? It is from one field to the next, you can have a different soil type. The hailstorm can ravage your neighbor's farm and spare yours. And in the inherent localness, you need local founders to be able to understand that context and deploy solutions specifically to them. And over the last 4 years, we've really turned our sights and investment on companies that are founded by proximate leaders, folks that have come from agricultural communities or are deeply embedded in them and can sort of drive the context-specific solutions that are necessary, that you can only get from living and breathing the climate adaptation challenges in these regions. So we've now 80% of our investments since 2020 have been in local founders, often coming through our fellowships program to support that. And we're really excited that the solution orientation and the scale potential is really starting to come through in our work.
Thank you so much, Chris. I mean, again, I think to reiterate, ultimately it's the voice of the local communities that really inform both the failures, lessons, and the successes. But that's such a very hopeful story to talk about 2008 and where you are today and the impact. So thank you for that. Let me actually, Saliha, please do join us at the panel as well. And I'll come to you as we go around. Thank you. Let me now turn to Dipayan Day. You're the chair of the South Asian Forum for Environment, as we said, SAFE. Your leadership has been instrumental in advancing both environmental as well as the social cohesion and initiatives in South Asia. So turning to you, you've received a grant and as also Beyond AIM, there's been a lot of recognition of the work you've been doing, supporting local innovations and then the impact in the communities you work. Can you share your insights, how when we talk about this kind of locally led initiatives, how do they bridge the finance gap by improving access for funding to the community-driven initiatives? And especially when you look at now, you've been part of it, what are some lessons when we talk about scale of impact that you're starting to glean that could be useful for others in this space as well? So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Srilata, and thanks AFSIA and the Resilience Hub for this wonderful platform where we can really talk about the innovation. And just picking up one line from Chris, like, at least if we could bring 2 or 3 voices from the ground and listen from the horse's mouth, like how do they supplement, complement, and then excel in the process of taking up the climate challenge. So let me first tell like what exactly we did. That particular project is very important because unless you understand that, you cannot understand how we propel across the time and the challenges. So a lot of areas in South Asia get inundated with, say, seawater rising or with flood water. And we developed small rafts made up of bamboo, just small bamboo raft. And we started practicing regenerative agriculture with a slime soil, which the communities made a mix out of the agro-waste, which is a circularity in itself, and we balanced it with the nutrients, and finally that gave a floating farm in the inundated farmland, so back to productivity again. So that was an innovation, an adaptive innovation. But you know, when we come to finance, still now there is no such mainstream financing mechanism to support innovative adaptation per se. So what we got is a lot of support from, number one, the corporate sector through corporate social responsibilities. Then the global development agencies like, say, Global Development Network, then Japan Social Development Forum, they came up. And finally, we were in a stage where we wanted to eagerly understand what is the economy of scale. Because we started with 20 floors and we traveled to, say, 200. But what next? We got UNDP as, I would call it a miracle or a blessing, whatever you say, but the scaling up was like with UNDP AFCIA program, what we could do is that we scaled it up. I think this is better. We scaled it up in a way that can give us a revenue from inside. So the farmers who are embedded or included in that program, they started internal lending. And believe me, last 1 year means 4 cycles, we have not used any external grants. So we now wanted something that we don't want grants. I mean, I'm not saying this. The farmers saying that. But give us more scale. We want to see 10x in the entire South Asian ecoregion. So Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, especially northern Sri Lanka, talk about, say, Philippines. Everywhere this problem is there, that the areas are getting inundated with seawater. So we got, again, very recently, the Jeff Assembly Challenge Award, but that's also a grant, and we are now eagerly looking for some investment. But a learning lesson is that in adaptation, there are 3 bottlenecks which we need to overcome. This is a climate initiative. A lot of carbon leverages are there, but that is a scope 3 leverage which cannot be literally converted into credit points so that we can get direct carbon, say, advantages. Number 2 is in mainstream system, the risk assessment is very, very interesting. Whenever there is a financing, people talk about risk assessment, and what we are doing is the most vulnerable, risky area. So who on earth can, support a system which is entirely risk-prone? And third, we need to overcome the digital barrier. We need a lot of value chains in the supply side. Cold chains we need. The farmers who are working in the field, they are totally divided into rural and urban, further with the digital, proximities. The urban is quite proximal to the digital system, but the rural people are still not. They're afraid of using the Android with their banking system. So these are the barriers, and these are learning lessons for us to which we are working towards. Maybe the second round of grant that we have got from AFCIA, mostly we will try to overcome this, and especially we are wanting that a decarbonized, say, supply cold chain, if that can be added as a value chain, I think we are going to go global. So that is the scenario where we are. Thank you, Srilata, for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Dipayan. I mean, there's a couple of points that nicely linked to what Chris started with in terms of, again, the local engagement, which you started talking with, but you also stretched it to this idea that once you have some kind of financial and technical viability in the enterprise, what is the ramp up? And then the value chain development becomes critical for scale. So it's great to see, and I hope we can start connecting these dots, because I'd like to also then hear about what others can do in this space to address some of the things you talked about. And it's also a space of interesting when you talk about de-risking. So I do want us to keep that in mind, because one, how do you price that risk? But also, there's also a lot of perception of risk. I mean, there's risk and there's perception. People just talk about, but maybe it's not as risky as you think, because can we separate the real risk from the perceived risk and then bring in guarantees or other kinds of risk mitigation and transfer mechanisms? So thank you for bringing that into play as well in this conversation. Let me now turn to Pablo Perez from BNP Paribas. You represent a leader in sustainable finance, playing a transformative role in climate action. There's been a lot of impact investing and innovative financial tools. In fact, in a panel I was just here earlier, we had your sustainable markets lead as well. So I see BNP Paribas being a forefront in terms of adaptation finance and innovative finance. And you've been also working with UNDP on our Global Fund for Coral Reef, which is a very exciting blended finance facility that brings nature and climate and investments together. So how can institutions like BNP Paribas support locally led adaptation? Again, both the impact finance, of course, that you can advance, but perhaps keeping in mind a couple of barriers that others have brought in when you look at risk. And how do you look at risk when you look at the impact finance as well? Over to you, Pablo.
Can you hear me? Yeah? Yes. Thanks, Srilata, and very glad to be here and to discuss this topic. I think there are several points that are very interesting. I just start with BNP Paribas and what we do. We've got a pocket first that is our company engagement pocket. We've been active in microfinance for more than 30 years. We also have a 400 million pocket that we invest in dedicated impact investments, and notably at early stages, so we can take some risks there. Then myself, I sit on the bond market, so really the institutional investors where there is scale, and scale actually can be the enemy there, which is the interesting part. We have to realize the supply chain that exists into the financial system. And notably, I mean, the capital markets and the fixed income markets are very large markets. It's trillions of dollars. And what we saw with the green bond market, for instance, it's an interesting story where it started in 2008 with the World Bank issuing its first green bond. Very innovative instrument at the time. A lot of skepticism about the scalability of the product, would it work? And actually, notably after the Paris Agreement, we've seen volumes pick up. And it's a chain. Wherever you've got more issuance, you've got more investors looking at it, and you're really starting their virtuous cycle. So the green bond market is great, is directing really financial flows and investors' money into eligible activities. Now, the second stage, or the 2.0 version, will be how we price the impact, actually. It's great to invest into an activity that's good for environment, but what does it is yielding, and notably for everyone. There's just one point I won't touch upon before, the boring bit, which is regulation. The financial system is awfully regulated. And actually it's interesting. You had the 2008 crisis, a lot of regulation, took 15 years to arrive where we are now, where we've got capital requirements for the risks. So it's how you measure the risk again, and what is the capital that you put in front of it. And this will decide capital allocation and where the capital is going. Chris is great because it's equity, it's very early stage investment where you can take some risk. Bond investors, fixed income investors, or even us, the banks, I mean, we're holding deposits. We're holding depositors' money, pension funds, well, they will need to pay the pension fund at some point. So they need to respect as well what their investees want and require. Now the question of the risk perception is one that is evolving. I think at UNGA, the Pact for the Future was signed, where there is a lot of very interesting ideas. Now what we want to see is how those ideas come into reality for a sector that is heavily regulated, and we just hope that it's not going to take 15 years. What is very important is partnerships. We'll need all to be at the table and discuss and understand really what are the entailed risks. And now the products that we are developing on our side with institutional investors is de-risk products. Are they perfect? Maybe not, because there will not be as much as we want skin in the game in the first iterations. We clearly need de-risk mechanism, maybe 100% guaranteed, a bit counterintuitive, a bit unnatural, but it's a first step. It will be a stepped approach. We'll need the institutional money to get familiar with this asset class in a de-risk format, but really to have, I would say, to dip the toes. To dip the toes, to understand how it works, and to see and realize that it's not as risky as it can be perceived. I think we're all working on old models, and adaptation is a very interesting one. We understand that actually today we don't have the appropriate data, but also we are maybe not interpreting the data in the right way. I mean, when having discussion with my risk managers, they will apply what the regulation is because we are a regulated business. Now we are doing very exciting transactions. We are notably working on one for coral reef conservation. And what we are doing is that we are basically securitizing grant donor money. So what we are saying to a donor is, don't give a grant up front. Let us front it with investors' money in a de-risk format. And we all agree on the framework, on the approach that we want to see, what we want to measure as an outcome. And if we reach this outcome, the donor will reimburse the investors. And it's actually a win-win situation. Investors can have access and exposure to those high-impact projects and I think it's great to see a video. I mean, impact report is great, but it's a table. It's great to see exactly what is happening on the ground. And for the donors, and this is really a discussion we're having today with the donors and the guarantors, is let us involve the private sector. And again, there might be at first not all the skin in the game, but it's a learning process with a lot of humility for everyone. For donors, focusing on impacts to me will be key. It's really the notion of output versus outcomes. So those are all the very interesting transactions that we're doing. I think there is clear acceleration in the discussion, which is very exciting. Last year, when I was talking to all the stakeholders, so project developers, but also development banks, we were working on 1 or 2 projects. Now we've got a pipeline of at least 10. So the acceleration will be good. I think it's really about partnerships and getting everyone at the table. And my last word, let's not have perfect be the enemy of good.
Fantastic, Pablo. I mean, we couldn't have orchestrated this better, and we haven't. I mean, I'm loving how it started with Chris, 2008, working small farm. How do you make it viable? And then you look at the risks and perceived risks, and how institutional investors, and where you sit, Pablo, we look at it. But it's interesting, you've now taken the conversation to impact, and then given the impact, can we have information flow down in a way that helps better interpret the risk? And it's almost like, where renewables were, I feel like a couple of decades ago, where people didn't know how to invest in this market. So it's great to see that, yes, the risks are there, but maybe if it's guaranteed, if somebody can come alongside us with donor funding, we'll start dipping our toe in this space. And then if you show us the impact, then more money gets unlocked. So it's fantastic. Thank you for all those insights. And I'm just trying to connect the dots. And it's just, for me, again, I think, Jasper, you talked about goosebumps when you were talking about it. But it's just really hopeful, to be honest, to speak about it. Let's bring it back to the ground reality again about the entrepreneur and what you're facing. And then we'll come back and circle to Saliha. So Shah Rafai Chowdhury, you're the co-founder and president, as we said earlier, Footsteps Bangladesh. You've been working on impactful community-led solutions on addressing climate challenges, and specifically also that promote environmental and economic growth. You benefited from financial and technical support, but we want to understand from your perspective, what has been the impact of your solution, especially as your objectives are using that solution on economic, environmental, and social impact, and how talking a little bit about the sustainability. Again, not the repeated grant model, but how do these kinds of injections of grant capital help look at the sustainability of your initiative, and what's the value of these partnerships for you? So over to you. Thank you.
Talk. All right. First of all, thank you so much. It is an honor to be able to share my story on a global platform like COP. So I'm truly grateful to the Resilience Hub, UNDP, and all of the partners for giving this opportunity. So a bit of context about my work, especially with the AFCIA grant. So back in my country, which is Bangladesh, we are known as a very flood-prone nation. We face flooding on a regular basis. So after an experience in 2018 while I was on ground, I have this thing where, like, whenever I see a problem, I try to see an opportunity into that. So being in that space, I saw...
Definition of an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Being in that space, I saw so much water around me, and I had this thought, which was, what if I was able to convert all of this water into drinking water? And what happens during floods is traditional water sources, they go underwater, and people are not able to access drinking water, which is a major crisis during flood scenarios. So the idea of this portable water filter came into my mind, which was called Dream Water. And at that time, when I went to like different funders, different investors, everybody was like, this is a very ambitious idea. Better have something ready, which we are ready to fund. Which also showed that in countries like Bangladesh or in the developing world, people were ready to bet on traditional solutions more than on adaptation solutions where there was a risk as well. So what we did, we started working on the different projects that we had. We started gathering pennies from those different projects and started working on this concept itself. And it wasn't until 2021 when a small organization based in New Zealand gave us around $3,000 to build the first 9 prototypes, which we then deployed on ground in northern Bangladesh. So when it comes to the deployment itself, the device is something that we built. So we started thinking, how do we make it the most impactful on ground? And we found out that in rural Bangladesh, a big challenge is it is considered as a taboo for women to work because they also spend 3 to 4 hours every single day collecting water from their traditional sources. So that also gave us an idea. Why not give them these filters so that they can make an income from the work they're already doing on ground, right? How can we convert these women into not only water entrepreneurs, but disaster responders, which will build their status in their communities as well? So that's when we integrated the idea of the product with the deployment itself. And after we deployed, we had a huge flooding in 2022 in the northeastern part of Bangladesh, and we were still working on the prototype at that point. And during the flood, people already saw our pilot project. We had organizations like CARE, ActionAid, they were reaching out to us that we need this filter right now. And we were like, we don't have this ready yet. Within a span of like 2 weeks, we built 26 filters, which was able to convert around 300,000 liters of flood water into drinking water as emergency response in that flood. So, but then there's the challenge as well. When it comes to testing a technology, you need to do a lot of trial and error process, right? You can't just build something and expect it to work. And when it comes to grant money or like investment funding, people don't like to see that much failure as well. So when we went to these funders again, they were like, okay, do you have the final product ready? If you do, then we are ready to give you funds. We are ready to buy the products from you, buy the devices from you, but we are not ready to invest in the development of the technology or even like the project model itself. And that's when the AFCIA grant came into our lives as a Hail Mary, because the funding then supported us to test these devices with women on ground for 18 months, which has allowed us to have 117 entrepreneurs on ground who have converted over 750,000 liters of flood water into drinking water. And in December, we're going into the market where we have a big list of nonprofits and even like banking corporations who are using their CSR to buy these devices and deploy it on ground with women agents in different parts of Bangladesh as well. So I think that is the beauty of a grant like AFCIA, because it gives us the creativity to work with our own vision as well, without tying us down with different sorts of limitations that you have to achieve this goal by this time or in this way itself. And with more funding support like AFCIA from the world, what happens is it actually capacitates, real adaptation methods on ground. Like now that we have this dream that we want to convert all the floodwater in Bangladesh and probably provide it to different parts of the world that there is water scarcity. And that is the dream that AFCIA has given us the capability of dreaming as well. So yeah, that is how these sort of grants are actually helping us in not only developing an idea into reality, but scaling it up in the best way possible in terms of locally led adaptation. Yeah, thank you.
That's just beautiful. I mean, it's not only the perseverance, and I'm sure Deepa, you resonate. All this resonates with you. I mean, just as an entrepreneur, the dream and the challenges and the opportunities, and continue to persevere. That's amazing. And I would say, I mean, I think I can speak to Adaptation Fund and EU and others who fund through UNDP support for this. I think it's our opportunity to be able to find entrepreneurs with these kinds of dreams and link them to other parts of the ecosystem. So it's almost, we're there just to connect the dots, because that's all you need. And then to see that the early stage capital, it's always such an issue. Like, who takes the risks on? Who takes the trust and the faith in the R&D and product development? But this goes to show that I think connecting the dots, bringing in catalytic capital that can then help take these dreams and convert into impact, which I'm sure as you talk to BNP Paribas and others, and I'm hoping later on you link to other parts of the ecosystem, how can you think about then scale and translating this impact into the kinds of stories that then allows us to again unlock capital from going into incubation and acceleration. Would be great to see that cycle kind of come through. So thank you so much for sharing that story. Very inspirational. Let me now introduce, because Saliha, thank you for joining us. Saliha Dubajic is the Senior Climate Change Specialist at the Adaptation Fund Board Secretariat. And she's representing the Adaptation Fund, and she's, I know, been personally as well instrumental when we first talked about this idea together in funding innovation for locally led adaptation. And she brings a lot of insights from the organization that has made a lot of transformative contributions to resilience around the world. And for the Adaptation Innovation Marketplace, the architecture I indicated earlier, the UNDP AFCIA partnership has been one of the first donors to come in with crucial support to scale up these kinds of locally led, community-led innovations. So Saliha, over to you. I mean, how does Adaptation Fund, especially now you also heard the various parts of the ecosystem you're now part of, how do you ensure that these receive more and more funding and support as you hear the stories, the results, and the impacts, but also the risks and challenges? It's obviously critical for continued support. So how do you see AF continuing this, and what commitments does the fund have bringing to this forum here and the COP? What are you hearing from in terms of scaling up this kinds of adaptation finance? So over to you, Saliha.
Thank you so much, Srilata. Good morning, everyone. It is really a pleasure to be here. Thanks to the Resilience Hub, Global Resilience Partnership, and of course UNDP. We have this wonderful partnership around Adaptation Fund Climate Innovation Accelerator, along with UNEP, CTCN, World Food Program, and UNIDO. But UNDP was one of the or the front runner. I won't get involved in that, but we are really, really pleased. And I have to say I'm a little bit stunned to hear all these interventions. It's one thing to read about it in a report. It's quite another to hear personal testimonies, and it's very, very touching. This was really the reason why we decided to set up AFCIA. Actually, the Adaptation Fund has decided back, the board had adopted a strategy back in 2018, deciding to focus Adaptation Fund's work along three main areas of work, one of which is innovation. And just to mention that another one of them is learning and sharing. And innovation and learning and sharing are intricately connected. With a very evolved, aware board like that, it took not too much time to convince them that since Adaptation Fund is dedicated to adaptation and provides solely grants-based funding with a mandate mission to serve the most vulnerable in the developing world, that perhaps we shouldn't be so risk averse, and we should continue this funding. We should consider this funding, obviously seed funding, but also a way to learn about adaptation. It is really important to try different things and to accelerate this process. Of course, everyone working on adaptation is innovating. You have to innovate and adapt. But how do we accelerate that process? And so the board agreed to set aside funding that will be really dedicated to innovation, in a sense that the board agreed to a higher risk tolerance. So for our projects, for the innovation projects under the Adaptation Fund, we don't expect the success rate to be this, we don't expect the same number of projects to be successful, moderately successful, as we do as we can see from our main adaptation portfolio. Instead, there is a tolerance for a lot of failure, with the understanding that there will be, hopefully, and we believe so, outstanding, outlying successes. And those are the ones that then need to be replicated and scaled up, right? And that is another question now. How do we do that? So I've mentioned several partners along with UNDP that are currently implementing AFSIA, so Innovation Small Grant Programs worldwide. But we have also recently launched other modalities. We have adaptation is local, and we serve the most vulnerable, and so locally led adaptation is baked into our mission as well, and we have been supporting it for a long time, but more recently we have formalized that further by launching several LLA modalities, one of which is multilateral, multilateral or regional aggregators for locally led adaptation. So these will be programs that will offer small grants at the most appropriate level of, I guess, devolved action or something like that. So at the most appropriate local level. And I'm very pleased to announce, if I can do that now.
Yes, please.
That the board at the last meeting in October decided to invite 4 implementing entities of the fund to submit proposals to develop these programs. The total amount is for $45 million that has been set aside. In addition to UNIDO, Caribbean Development Bank, and CAF, I was very happy that UNDP came in with a $10 million expression of interest, which was warmly received by the board. So congratulations. We're looking forward to expanding on this work. In fact, some of the directions we're seeing, maybe it's too early to talk about this, but some of the AFSIA work, now that it has had a chance to demonstrate results, will likely be systematically scaled, replicated using the LLA grants. So that's one of the ideas. I don't know if that's, I'm thinking of a different proposal, but I'm sure we will see a lot of that throughout the different programs, logically. I just want to say very quickly to reflect on some of the ideas I heard about this need to ensure the supply chain of finance along all the stages of innovation. And we need to do so from the perspective of the entrepreneur. And I'm talking about a smallholder farmer. I'm talking about the micro entrepreneur, the indigenous practice champion. We need to think about what does it take to support those innovators that may not, adaptation is a special kind of a beast, and also we are working in trying to ensure equitable access and social justice. And so how do we support very promising, necessary adaptation actions from the perspective of somebody who may have a solution that may seem unconventional but could be highly effective. This is something that does really require partnership and creative thinking on designing how to de-risk, how to create access, and how to ensure support along the way fully. So with that, thank you so much for this opportunity, and again, I really appreciated all the remarks I've heard so far.
Thank you so much, Saliha, first of all, for the good news that all of this hard work and results from our partners and our entrepreneurs has convinced AF to continue to invest in this space. And as you said, we need to keep that kind of financing and the risk appetite to support. I know we're running out of time, so let me just first of all say thank you so much for the panel, for the conversations. We need to continue connecting the dots, working in partnership. The ecosystem, as you can see, requires that all of us bring our shoulder to the wheel, to the collective action. So really, thank you again for everything. I do want to give 30 seconds or a minute to Acumen, who wants to make an announcement, and then I'll turn it over to Jasper to close. So again, thank you all so much, and on behalf of UNDP and all the partners, really appreciate all the hard work, commitment, and collaboration, and really was heartening to hear all the conversations, and it's been very hopeful and inspiring as well. So thank you, and over to you, Chris.
Well, great, and thank you for a few seconds here. I really appreciate, from entrepreneurship to early stage investing to bonds and capital markets and the foundational support sort of here, that we actually have a capital continuum right here on this panel. And it's that sort of engineering of this work that is absolutely critical if we're going to see scale across these pieces. Without it, we end up operating in our silos and not doing much. So I'm sort of very happy to announce that at this COP, Acumen is committing $300 million to investing in agricultural adaptation in emerging markets. Thank you. And that'll be made up of 3 primary initiatives operating across Latin America, India, East and West Africa, and I just came previous to this from the Pakistan Pavilion, where we announced a $90 million blended finance facility, the first ever climate adaptation facility for Pakistan, being launched this year. So all of that will roll up into $300 million to respond to what we've all raised here. This is scale in adaptation in emerging markets with catalytic early stage capital that can take risks on you and on you, and help scale alongside capacity building these initiatives going forward, with the intention of reaching you someday and ensuring that the commercial capital flows into the space as well. So huge thanks to UNDP and the Resilience Hub and our partners at GRP for the space to announce this. And please come talk to us about what this means afterwards. We're happy to be here, and thanks for the space.
Thank you so much, and thanks to the panelists. I'm going to ask everyone to give you a round of applause, but I'm just going to say a few words first. It's just to pick up on what you say. It's very aligned. It's lovely. Partnership. You need to work together. Don't work in silos. Listen. Everyone. You mentioned it first, and then you said horse's mouth, which I think really sums it up nice. You need to listen to what the problem is, because the people on the ground know what the issues are. The support to scale up, value chain of finance, I think that's critical. Take it the whole way. Listen to the farmers. They know what the problem is and why they are fearful of change. And it's a big step. On the same note, you need to take a holistic approach. So you need to look at everything. I think also worth mentioning that the entrepreneurs are the ones doing the hard work. The rest of us are actually not working that hard. If you compare it to the actual entrepreneurs, they're also the ones taking the risk. Oh, thank you. Like this. Measurement. We need to know what we measure, because you can only manage what you measure. There's opportunity in this, and also I heard failure once, and I think that's a very important point. Failure is an important thing to learn from. Again, what do you measure? What do you actually work with to advance your ideas and your models? Final word, learning. From failure, from what we've done, from this great body of knowledge that we have in UNDP and in Acumen, Adaptation Fund, PMB, and the entrepreneurs, maybe more so. It is from what we see has worked and hasn't worked that we can take steps forward. So guys, you've seen the show. Now, if you're not already involved, do join us and make this even more forceful. And with that, please, Srilata, thank you so much. A round of applause for Srilata and the excellent panelists. Thank you.